My name is Claire Whitmore. The day I confronted my mother in court for staging my father's death, I walked straight past her crocodile tears and handed the judge the envelope that exposed her fake medical affidavits. I will never forget the way her smile cracked when I whispered, "This is for Dad." Tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching this from? Because wherever you are, betrayal knows no borders. The funeral home on Maplewood Drive should have smelled like lilies and quiet regret. Instead, the air tasted metallic, thick with thunder and stale perfume, as if the universe itself was holding its breath in disgust. Rain traced rivulets down the stained glass windows behind my father's closed casket. I stood beside it like a dutiful daughter, one hand gripping the polished wood, the other clenched around my phone. 3 rings, then a soft click. "Claire, darling," came my mother's voice, syrupy and bright, my breath caught. "Where are you?" she giggled. "Cancun. Have you seen the pictures I sent? Michael and I just ordered margaritas the size of bathtubs." I blinked. For a moment I couldn't speak. "It's your husband's funeral," I finally said, each word cutting through my throat like glass. "Dad is dead, or did you forget?" There was a clink of ice, a sigh. "Oh honey, life moves on, you should too." My grip tightened on the phone until my knuckles ached. The funeral director shifted awkwardly a few feet away, avoiding my eyes. I could feel the curious stares of Dad's old friends, of distant cousins whispering behind black veils, wondering where she was. "Is this some kind of joke?" I asked, voice trembling now. "You didn't even come to say goodbye." "Claire, don't be so dramatic. Funerals are such a morbid tradition, and honestly, your father wouldn't want me crying in some dreary little hall." A bitter laugh escaped me. "So you flew off with your soulmate." "Michael understands me in ways your father never did," she replied breezily. "Besides, Robert made his choices." Robert, as if he weren't the man who'd built our entire life from nothing, who paid off her debts, who kissed her hand every night like she was royalty, who, don't you dare talk about him in the past tense like he was disposable, I spat. "You could have at least pretended to grieve." A beat of silence. "Claire," she said, coolly now, "if you're trying to shame me into guilt, you're wasting your breath. People die, you'll understand when you grow up." She hung up. The dial tone buzzed like a wasp in my ear. I slowly lowered the phone, staring at the casket as if it might crack open and offer me one final answer. Outside, the sky ripped open and thunder cracked like judgment. It wasn't just grief pooling in my chest anymore, it was fury. I walked out of the chapel without another word, leaving whispers in my wake. Someone called my name, but I didn't turn around. My heels echoed down the marble steps into the storm. I didn't know what was coming next. But I knew this, something about my father's death didn't feel real. And my mother's smile, it was hiding something. I couldn't sleep. Not that I expected to, not after the funeral. My apartment felt hollow, like my father had taken all the sound with him. Even the creak in the floorboard by the kitchen stayed quiet, as if mourning too. I sat cross-legged on my bed in a pair of leggings and my dad's old flannel, scrolling through my camera roll. Most of the photos were blurry and boring, accidental shots of receipts, screenshots of recipes I'd never try. But then I landed on one from 3 Christmases ago. Dad was holding a mug of cider, wearing a ridiculous reindeer sweater I'd dared him to buy. He was smirking at the camera, eyes soft and proud. I could almost hear him say, "Took you long enough to win that promotion, kiddo." He always called me kiddo, even when I turned 30. I swiped to another photo, him and me, side by side on the porch swing, our boots up on the railing, laughing at something. My mom must have taken it, back when she still smiled at us. Back when I believed she loved him. My throat tightened. I tapped the screen to bring the photo closer, noticing something I hadn't before, Dad's hand resting gently on mine. Protective, steady, real. I didn't realize I was crying until a drop hit my phone. I wiped my cheek quickly, annoyed at myself for still holding onto hope that someone would knock on the door and tell me this was all some sick mistake. That was when my phone buzzed. One vibration, then another. A message preview flashed across the screen. "Dad, help me. Go to the cemetery, quickly." I froze. The contact photo, it was still the same picture of him holding up a wrench in the garage, grinning like he just fixed the unfixable. But that number had been disconnected. I had tried it just after the funeral, dialing it in some pathetic hope that voicemail might still answer. It hadn't. My heart started hammering. I opened the message. It was real. No attachments, no links, just that one line, "Help me, go to the cemetery, quickly." I stared at it, brain stuttering. Spam, a cruel joke. Had someone gotten hold of his old number? No, I whispered, gripping the phone tighter. No one would, but that was a lie. People would. People like my mother, people like Michael, the man she now called her soulmate, whose smug face I remembered from one of her Facebook photos years ago. I had scrolled past it back then, thinking he was just another friend from her yoga class. Everything suddenly felt too quiet. The fridge hummed in the kitchen. The radiator clicked once. I rose to my feet. My coat was still on the chair by the door, rain-speckled from earlier. I grabbed it, still barefoot, the message glowing in my palm. Maybe it was a hacker. Maybe someone was trying to mess with me. But maybe, just maybe, what if it was him? I pulled on boots and a scarf with trembling hands. The streets outside were slick with rain, the lights casting long, eerie reflections that danced on the asphalt. The cemetery was a 12-minute drive. I didn't even think about it. I didn't pack a flashlight or call anyone. I just grabbed my keys and left. The moment I stepped outside, the cold slapped me awake. I was halfway to the car when another message came through. Dad, don't trust her. I stopped dead. The screen flickered with moisture, the droplets making the text shimmer. I looked around wildly, expecting someone to be watching. Nothing, just wet sidewalks and dim porches. Don't trust her. I didn't need to ask who her was, my mother. Something sharp twisted in my gut, something that had been there since the moment she said, "Life moves on." I slid into the car, hands icy against the steering wheel. The cemetery was waiting. And so was the truth. The Asheville Memorial Cemetery sat at the edge of town, wrapped in fog so thick it looked like the mountains had exhaled and forgotten to inhale again. I parked near the wrought iron gates, my headlights cutting weak tunnels through the mist. The engine ticked as it cooled, and for a second I just sat there, hands still gripping the steering wheel. "This is insane," I whispered, but my phone screen still glowed in the cup holder. "Don't trust her." I stepped out into the cold. The air smelled like wet soil and pine. My breath puffed in front of me as I shut the car door quietly, as if I didn't want to alert something already watching. The gravel path crunched under my boots. Dad's grave was fresh soil and a temporary plaque. The permanent headstone hadn't even been installed yet. That thought alone made my stomach churn. How could someone's life be reduced to laminated paper and damp dirt so quickly? The fog shifted like something alive. I wrapped my coat tighter around myself and walked faster, scanning the rows of headstones. Marble angels, granite crosses, names carved in permanence. Then I saw it. Robert Whitmore, beloved husband, devoted father. I stopped a few feet away. The earth was still darker than the rest, rain-soaked and uneven. A cheap funeral wreath leaned sideways, its ribbon fluttering weakly in the breeze. "This is stupid," I muttered, stepping closer. "He's not." Something moved. A sharp rustle behind me. I spun around so fast I nearly lost my footing. "Who's there?" Silence, just fog rolling between the stones. My pulse pounded in my ears. I scanned the tree line bordering the cemetery. Nothing but skeletal branches and shadows. "Stop messing with me." I shouted, my voice cracking. No answer. I turned back toward the grave and froze. There was something resting against the base of the temporary plaque, a white envelope. It hadn't been there when I first walked up, I was sure of it. My heart began to hammer again, but this time it wasn't grief. It was something electric, something alive. I crouched slowly, my knees trembling. The envelope was sealed. My name was written across the front in familiar, uneven handwriting. Claire, not Claire Whitmore. Not to my daughter, just Claire. My throat tightened. "That's his handwriting," I whispered. My hands shook as I picked it up. The paper felt dry despite the damp air, as if it had just been placed there. Another branch snapped somewhere behind me. I whipped around. I said, "Who's there?" The fog shifted violently near the far row of graves. For a second, just a second, I thought I saw the silhouette of someone standing near the trees. Tall, still, watching. My breath hitched. "Dad." The word slipped out before I could stop it. The shape vanished as quickly as it had appeared. I didn't wait to investigate. I tore open the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a single folded sheet and a small slip of paper. The letter was short. "If you're reading this, it means you came alone. Good, I need you to trust your instincts. I'm not dead. I couldn't risk telling you before. They're watching everything. Go to the coordinates on the second page. Do not tell anyone, not even her." My vision blurred. I unfolded the smaller paper. A GPS location. Coordinates just outside the city, deep in the wooded Blue Ridge parkland. "I'm not dead." The words echoed in my skull. A laugh bubbled up, half hysterical. "This isn't real." But the handwriting was real, the phrasing was real, and the warning, not even her, felt too specific to be a prank. Another sharp crack split the air behind me, closer this time. I didn't turn around. I stuffed the letter into my coat pocket and bolted. Gravel sprayed under my boots as I ran toward the gates. I could feel it now, eyes on my back, heavy and deliberate. The fog seemed thicker, swallowing the headstones as if trying to erase my path. I didn't stop until I was inside my car, doors locked, engine roaring to life. My chest heaved as I gripped the steering wheel. I'm not dead. The coordinates burned in my pocket like a live wire. If this was a trap, it was a cruel one. If it was real. Then my father hadn't died. And my mother was lying about far more than Cancun. I slammed the car into drive. Whatever waited at those coordinates was either the truth or the final nail in my sanity. I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of my bed with the letter crumpled in my hands, the GPS coordinates open on my phone. My coat was still on. So were my boots. I hadn't even turned on the lights. Just me, the envelope, and the creeping realization that my entire reality might be a lie. Every time I tried to reason it out, my thoughts tangled into dead ends. If Dad was alive, who did we bury? If he was faking his death, why? And why send the message to me and not the police? I stood abruptly and began pacing across the creaky wooden floor, my bare hands chilled from the cold air still clinging to me. My heart wouldn't slow down. I felt like I was walking the edge of a cliff in the dark, and with every step, a new piece of ground threatened to crumble beneath me. The letter had said, "Do not tell anyone, not even her." Of course he meant my mother. I thought back to the call at the funeral, her voice like she was sipping a cocktail beside a pool rather than mourning her husband. Her breezy tone, her soulmate. I wanted to believe this was a sick prank, that some psycho had stolen his old phone number and was messing with a grieving daughter. But I knew my father's handwriting, and I knew his instincts. He was a planner, strategic, never reckless. He would never joke about this. I whispered the words aloud to the empty room. He wouldn't joke about this. I grabbed my keys. The GPS pin led to a national park just outside Asheville, somewhere deep in the woods, well beyond the usual hiking trails. I knew the area a little. We used to go camping there when I was a kid, before things got complicated between my parents. The roads narrowed as I drove, the forest closing in like an old secret. Branches arched overhead like ribs, and my headlights flickered as mist danced through the beams. The location on the GPS led to a dirt road that veered off the main path, barely visible in the moonlight. My tires crunched gravel as I pulled off and followed the signal, my phone dimming every few seconds from inactivity. I had to keep tapping the screen just to make sure I wasn't lost. 10 minutes in, the trees opened into a small clearing and I saw it. A cabin. Wooden, weather-worn. Tucked against the tree line like it had been forgotten by time. I parked and stepped out cautiously, leaving the car idling behind me. The air was still, too still. I walked slowly toward the front porch, heart thundering louder than my footsteps. Then movement. Someone stepped into the light of the front porch lantern. My breath caught. He was thinner, grayer. His face was lined with exhaustion, his eyes hollowed with something deeper than just age, but there was no mistaking him. "Dad," he took one step forward. "Claire," I didn't breathe, my vision tunneled. My knees buckled and I hit the cold earth before I could stop myself. It was him, alive, not a ghost, not a dream, not a memory. He dropped beside me, catching my arms. "Are you okay?" he asked, voice hoarse as if it hadn't been used in weeks. I buried you," I said. My hands touched his face like I needed proof. "We buried you." "I know," he murmured, lowering his eyes. "I'm sorry." "No," I whispered. "You don't get to be sorry yet. You're supposed to be dead." I gave a eulogy. I watched them lower the casket. I stood there alone while Mom was in Cancun. Dad, with some man named Michael. He closed his eyes. "I know." I pulled away slightly, just enough to steady myself. "You need to explain everything right now." He exhaled slowly and looked over his shoulder toward the cabin. "Come inside, it's not safe to talk out here." "Not safe?" I echoed. "Dad, what is going on?" He looked back at me. "They were going to destroy me, Claire. I didn't have a choice." That stopped me. He stood, extended a hand. "Please, just give me 10 minutes. Then if you want to leave, I won't stop you." I hesitated. Every bone in my body screamed to run. But something in his face, the weight he carried in his shoulders, told me he'd been carrying this for longer than I could imagine. I took his hand. And for the first time since the funeral, something like hope flickered in my chest. Hope. And 1,000 more questions. The cabin's interior smelled like dust, old coffee, and melted wax. A single candle flickered on a rickety wooden table beside a stack of manila folders, casting tall shadows across the walls. The room was sparsely furnished, just a couch that had clearly seen better years, a narrow cot in the corner, and an old wood-burning stove glowing faintly with warmth. It looked like a hideout built for waiting, not living. Dad poured steaming water from a battered kettle into two mismatched mugs. He'd always hated tea, but now he handed me one like it was routine, like he'd been doing this for days, maybe weeks. I sat stiffly on the edge of the couch, still too stunned to absorb the full weight of what was happening. He set the mug down in front of me, then slowly sat across from me in a creaking wooden chair, elbows on knees, face low in shadow. "I know it's hard to believe," he said quietly. "That you're alive," I whispered. "It's not the hardest part anymore." He didn't smile, didn't flinch, instead he reached for the first folder. "I was going to retire next year," he began. "Had it all worked out. Our mortgage was almost paid off, the firm offered me a consultant track. I thought your mother and I were, well, not perfect but stable." He opened the folder and passed me a photo. It was a screenshot of a notarized will, except his signature looked off, like someone had copied it too perfectly. I frowned. "What is this?" He tapped the bottom of the page. "Look closer at the date." I did, my stomach twisted. "That's 2 weeks before your death certificate was filed," he nodded. "They had this drawn up, filed through a lawyer friend of Michael's in Raleigh. The new version left everything to your mother, everything, stocks, insurance, the house, my accounts." I blinked. "But she already had joint access to most of that. Why fake your death?" He opened the next folder, bank statements, transfers, highlighted entries. "Because she knew I was changing everything in the new year. I told her I was removing her from the business account. I'd already started a new will, one that left most of the estate to you and a few charities." My hands curled around the mug. It was still warm, but I couldn't feel it anymore. "And Michael?" I asked. His face hardened. "Michael Hands, wealthy real estate developer. And married, by the way. I found that out after I went missing. He's married. Twice over, actually, has kids in Florida. Claire, I think this whole thing started out as an affair and turned into an opportunity." I stared at him. "So they wanted you gone, but you're here. How did you get away?" He hesitated. "I got lucky," he said. "I found out about the second life she was living. Michael had been to our house while I was away at a conference. Something just didn't sit right. She was acting different. I started checking things." He passed me a photo, grainy surveillance footage of Mom and Michael outside a bank. "She didn't know I'd installed cameras after that break-in last year." I remembered that. Someone had broken into the garage and taken some tools. At least that's what we thought. "I started gathering evidence," he continued, flipping to another page. "I kept it off my devices, made physical copies. Then I overheard her talking on the phone one night. She was standing in the hallway. She thought I was asleep." His eyes went far away for a moment. "She said, 'By next month he'll be gone and I'll have the deed. We just have to keep him calm until then.'" I clutched the arms of the couch. "They were planning to kill you," I whispered. He looked at me, eyes sharp but weary. "I don't think they wanted it to be messy. I think they were planning to stage something, an accident maybe, a disappearance, but I beat them to it." "You faked your own death." He nodded once. "With the help of someone I trust. I left everything in motion and vanished the same night the documents were supposed to be filed. They must have panicked. They declared me dead within a week. Your mother cried to everyone about losing me suddenly, claimed it was a heart attack while I was out of state, used a falsified medical report and had a cremation certificate rushed. No body, no autopsy, just ashes in a box that probably came from someone else's fireplace." I covered my mouth. "She even made a comment at the funeral," I whispered. "Cremation keeps things simple." He leaned back in the chair, rubbing his hands over his face. "She thought I was a fool, that I'd never see it coming, but I did." The flame from the candle cast deep lines across his face. "And now?" I asked. "Why tell me now?" "Because it's not over," he said. "They think they've won. They think I'm gone and the money's theirs, but I've kept records, bank transfers, emails, false forms. Enough to get them both locked away, but I need help." I sat there, the cabin walls closing in, my entire childhood reshuffling behind my eyes. Mom, Michael, their sudden trip, the lack of a real body, the signatures. "How could she do this?" I asked, barely breathing. "How could she do this to you?" "She didn't just do it to me," he said quietly. "She did it to us. The room fell silent, save for the low hiss of the wood stove and the quiet rage rising inside me. She hadn't just broken hearts. She had broken lives. And now it was my turn to choose what to do with that truth. The candle flickered between us, barely lighting the corners of the room, but his next words landed like spotlights. "There's one more piece of evidence," he said, voice low. "Something I couldn't risk bringing with me. It's still in the house." I tensed. "What do you mean in the house?" He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Our house. Your mother's house now, hidden in the study behind a false wall panel. You remember the bookshelf, third shelf from the bottom?" I nodded slowly, memories flashing of that oak-paneled room where he used to do his taxes with a mechanical pencil and old jazz records playing in the background. "There's a safe back there," he said. "I had it installed years ago. She never knew about it." "What's inside?" I asked, my throat dry. "Paper trails," he said. "Original deeds. Early copies of the will before she and Michael tampered with it. Notes I wrote while I was catching on. And a flash drive with some recordings. Phone calls, conversations I overheard." I swallowed hard. "Why didn't you take it with you?" "Because I didn't have time. I thought I'd planted enough evidence elsewhere, but some of the most damning proof is in that safe, and if I go back to get it, they'll know I'm alive. They're watching the property. But you," he paused, looking at me intently. "You could go in. No one would question it." I flinched. "You want me to walk into her house now like nothing's wrong and just steal it?" "It's not stealing, Claire, it's saving the truth, and it's not hers." I looked away, jaw clenched. "She'll be suspicious. She's already acting like she's moved on." "That's exactly why she won't see this coming," he said. "She thinks you're mourning. She thinks she's won." I felt my heart start to pound in my chest. "She and Michael have no idea I reached out to you," he added. "If you go now, before they change anything, you could get in and out. Say you want keepsakes. Photos. Nobody would question that." My thoughts raced. Images of the funeral, the phone call, the Cancun photos flashing in my head, her voice echoing, "Life moves on, darling." She hadn't just betrayed him, she'd made a fool of me too. What if she's home? She won't be, not all day. I've been watching the house. "You've been watching, from a distance," he said quickly. "I'm not reckless, I needed to know when the window would be safe." A strange quiet filled the space between us. I realized he hadn't stopped looking over his shoulder in days. I looked down at my hands. My fingers were cold again, even near the stove. "You're sure it's all still there?" I asked. "It has to be, unless they tear the place apart, which they won't if they don't know it exists. It's there. But I can't get it, Claire, not without exposing everything." And just like that, it was mine to carry. I nodded once. "I'll do it," he exhaled just a little. "Thank you." My stomach turned with anxiety, but under it something else. A pulse of resolve. She thought I was grieving. She thought I'd let this go. But tomorrow I'd walk into her house like the obedient daughter she underestimated, and I'd walk out with the truth. The house in Raleigh looked different. Same walls, same driveway, same white shutters Dad used to repaint every spring, but something about it now felt sterile, like it had been scrubbed clean of him. The porch light was already on when I pulled up. There were new potted succulents where his old ferns used to hang. One of them was fake. He would have hated that. I sat in my car for a long minute, rehearsing the lie one more time. "You're just here for keepsakes. Photos, maybe a watch, something sentimental. You're grieving. They won't question grief." The door opened before I could knock. "Claire," my mother said brightly, holding a wine glass like it was a natural extension of her hand. "Well, this is a surprise." She wore silk, champagne-colored, sleeveless, and her hair was curled like she was expecting company or entertaining someone already. "I was in town," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Thought I'd come by. There are a few things of Dad's I'd like to have, something small." Her eyes flickered. "Of course." She stepped back. "Take whatever you want. It's all just collecting dust now anyway." Inside, the air smelled like bergamot candles and lemon oil. No trace of his cologne. No hint of sawdust or tobacco or motor oil, just curated comfort. Michael appeared at the edge of the living room, barefoot and holding a tumbler of something amber. "Claire," he said, smiling like we were old friends. "Glad to see you. How are you holding up?" I forced a tight smile. "One day at a time." He nodded, almost patronizing. "That's the spirit." "I won't be long," I said, already walking toward the study. "Just want to grab a few personal things." "Help yourself," my mother called breezily. "You know where everything is." That was the point. The study looked almost untouched. She hadn't dared turn it into a yoga room or a wine cellar yet. I closed the door gently behind me and waited for the hum of conversation to resume out on the deck, for the clink of glasses and the soft drone of background jazz from the speaker in the corner. When I was sure I was alone, I crossed to the bookshelf, third shelf from the bottom. The old woodworking manuals still sat in a neat row, collecting dust. I slid them aside and ran my hand along the back panel. It clicked softly under my fingers. The false wall gave way with a whisper. Behind it, nestled into the wood, was a matte black safe. I dropped to my knees. Dad had told me the code. His birthday, reversed, with the last 2 digits of my college graduation year. It was something only I would remember, and something he knew I could never forget. I punched it in. The safe popped open. Inside, the documents were packed tightly in folders, labeled in Dad's meticulous handwriting. Scans of bank transactions, email printouts, voice memo transcripts, copies of revised wills, hers and his, and tucked into the corner a flash drive, labeled simply Michael Calls. I was sliding everything into my tote bag when footsteps crossed the deck outside. I froze, heart hammering. Laughter. My mother's voice, then Michael's, low and amused. I pressed the false panel back into place and stood, smoothing my hair and pulling a photo frame off the desk, one of Dad and me fishing when I was 11. The kind of thing a grieving daughter might pocket. I slipped the flash drive into my coat pocket. The clock on the bookshelf chimed. 8 p.m. dinner time, which meant at least an hour of wine and laughter and whatever reality they'd constructed for themselves since erasing my father. I opened the door slowly, stepping back into the hall with my bag slung casually over my shoulder. "You find what you needed?" my mother called from the deck. I smiled, stepping toward the back door. "Yeah," I said, "something small." She raised her glass in a mock toast. "See, healing already." Michael winked over his drink. I said nothing, just offered a faint smile and slipped through the door. Every step away from that house felt lighter. But inside my coat, my fingers gripped that flash drive like it was a detonator. They had no idea what I'd just taken. And for once, I had the power. The study door creaked louder than I remembered. I froze with one hand still inside the safe. The folders were already halfway into my tote bag. The flash drive, thank God, was zipped in my coat pocket. My heart slammed against my ribs like it was trying to break free. I glanced at the door. It was still shut, still quiet. I exhaled slowly. Just a few more seconds. Then the doorknob turned. My fingers flew. I yanked the last file out of the safe, shoved it into the tote, and swung the bookshelf panel closed with a barely audible click. By the time the door opened, I was standing in front of the desk, holding a random photo frame. Michael stepped in, his mouth twitching with mild amusement or suspicion. I couldn't tell. "Lose something?" he asked, one brow raised. I pasted on the most casual smile I could manage, clutching the frame like it held the secrets of the universe. "Oh, just grabbing a few photos. I used to love this one," I added, holding up the picture of Dad and me on the boat. I hadn't even looked at what I picked. Michael took a slow step forward, scanning the room with the kind of ease that only came from thinking he had nothing to fear. "Funny," he said, eyes landing on the bookshelf. "You've been in here a while." I shrugged, heart pounding in my ears. Nostalgia's a time warp, I guess. His gaze flicked to the tote bag. I followed his eyes and forced a laugh. "Don't worry, I'm not raiding the estate." I lifted the bag slightly. "Just a few keepsakes, some letters, a couple of his journals. I figured they'd mean more to me than to anyone else." He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Of course, take what you want." He walked farther in. Slowly, casually. Like a man on a stroll, not one circling suspicion. "Diane always said you were the sentimental one," he added. I tilted my head. "Diane? Your mother, she said you were always holding on to things, old birthday cards, your dad's fishing hats." He gestured vaguely. "Guess it checks out." "I was close to him," I said, still trying to sound calm. "She knows that." He stopped just a few feet from me now, and looked at me, really looked. I tried not to shift under it, but I could feel the flash drive pressing against my ribs through my coat lining. Every second ticked like a countdown in my head. He smiled again, but this time it was tighter. "Well," he said. "Good to see you, Claire." I nodded. "You too." We stood in silence for one long, brittle beat. Then he stepped aside and gestured toward the hallway. "After you." I walked past him, spine rigid, sweat prickling beneath my scarf. His cologne was too sharp, something woodsy and expensive, and I hated how it lingered after I passed. As I reached the front door, my mother called from the kitchen, "Claire, you staying for dinner?" I turned, smile glued to my face. "I've got to get back, early meeting tomorrow. Rain check?" "Of course," she chirped. Another time. I opened the door with trembling fingers and stepped into the cool night air, sucking in a breath like I'd been underwater. Michael hadn't stopped me, but he'd watched me. And I knew the difference. By the time I got back to my apartment, my fingers were trembling too badly to unlock the door on the first try. The second it clicked open, I stepped inside, dropped my tote bag on the kitchen table and locked the door behind me. Twice. My coat hit the floor. I didn't even bother turning on the overhead lights, just flicked on the small lamp by the window. Its amber glow felt safer, somehow softer. The kind of light you could cry under without feeling ridiculous. I dumped the contents of the tote out onto the table, letting the folders spill across the wood. My father's handwriting stared up at me from every label, each word a reminder: trust no one, protect the truth. I snapped photos of every document, one by one, using my phone camera. The forged will, the bank statements, a scan letter with a forged signature so close to Dad's that even I had to squint. Then I opened the flash drive. Took a moment for my old laptop to recognize it, and I held my breath until the folder opened. Dozens of audio files, dates, time stamps, some labeled Diane Kitchen Call or Michael August Garage. I didn't play them, not yet. I couldn't handle their voices again, not tonight. Not now that I knew what they were capable of. Instead, I uploaded a zip file of the photos and texted the link to the same encrypted number Dad had used to contact me. Got them. Sending everything now. A long pause. I watched the typing dots appear, then disappear, then appear again. Finally, "Dad, good job, destroy the originals." I stared at the message, waiting for more, a follow-up, a plan, a "meet me here or we're almost done." Nothing. I hesitated, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Where should I bring the flash drive, or should I come to the cabin? No reply. I waited 5 minutes, then 10. Sent another message. Dad, still nothing. I checked the time. It was past midnight. Maybe he was being cautious. Maybe the signal was bad where he was. Maybe he'd gone quiet on purpose, laying low like before. I told myself all of those things as I stood by the window, clutching my phone like it was oxygen. But anxiety was already coiling in my stomach. Cold, familiar. I tried calling the number, straight to voicemail. I tried again. Same thing. I sank down onto the couch, pulling my knees up to my chest. "Dad," I whispered. "Where did you go?" The room around me felt smaller than it had before. Too still, too quiet. My apartment had always been my safe space until now. Now it felt like a waiting room for something I couldn't name. Was he in trouble, or had he left for good? I glanced at the stack of documents I was supposed to destroy. My hand hovered over them. But something inside me hesitated. Why now? Why disappear after telling me to erase the one thing tying him to the truth? I sat there for hours, my phone screen lighting up every few minutes, only to show notifications from apps I didn't care about. Nothing from him. Nothing from anyone. Just silence and the growing fear that I had been left behind. Again. 3 days. That's how long it had been since Dad's last message. 3 days of checking my phone every hour, of refreshing my encrypted app, of replaying his final words, "Good job, destroy the originals," and wondering if they were some kind of goodbye. I didn't destroy them. Something in me refused. Call it instinct or maybe just fear, but I tucked the documents into a hollowed-out book on my shelf and hid the flash drive inside an old makeup bag under my sink. If he wanted them gone, he'd have to do it himself. Except he didn't come. And then came the knock. Not hurried, not loud, just official. I opened the door to find 2 officers standing on my porch, rain dripping from the brim of their hats. "Claire Whitmore." I felt a jolt of cold in my spine. "Yes, you're under arrest for breaking and entering, burglary, and possession of stolen property." The words didn't land at first. They just floated there between us like someone else's nightmare. "What?" I blinked. "I think there's been a..." One officer stepped forward, reading me my rights as the other pulled my arms behind my back. The click of metal cuffs was sharp, final. "Wait, what are you talking about? I didn't. This is a mistake." But they weren't listening. My neighbors were, though. A curtain twitched across the street. A door creaked open down the hall. I was shoved gently but firmly into the back of the cruiser. The doors locked behind me with a mechanical clunk. My breath fogged the window as we pulled away from my apartment. My phone buzzed once in my pocket before they took it away. I never got to see who it was. At the station, the cold was worse. The fluorescent lights were relentless, and everything reeked of disinfectant and recycled sorrow. They took my fingerprints, my photo, my dignity. I sat in an interview room for nearly an hour, staring at the smeared window and the scuffed linoleum until finally a detective walked in and dropped a manila folder onto the table with a dull thud. Inside, photos of me in the study, taken from the hallway. I looked up, stunned. She was watching me, I whispered. The detective didn't react. She set me up, I said louder. Those aren't stolen documents. They belong to my father, he's alive. He sent me to get them. His brows lifted slightly. Your father's alive. He faked his death, he had to. My mother and her boyfriend tried to steal everything, I have proof. The detective leaned back, unimpressed. Do you have that proof with you now? I hesitated. No, but the door opened behind him. And there she was, my mother, dressed like a grieving widow out of a soap opera, pearls, a black wrap, hair pinned tight and pristine. She looked straight through me as if I were nothing more than an inconvenience. Claire, she said softly, a tremble in her voice. Why would you do this? My hands curled into fists on the table. You know exactly why. You lied about everything. You stole from Dad, you and Michael. She let out a broken sob, turning to the detective. She hasn't been well since the funeral. I tried to be patient. I told her to take what she wanted, and I thought she was grieving. But when I found the safe open and the files missing, she's lying, I shouted, rising to my feet. She's framing me. She's all I have left, my mother whispered, tears now sliding perfectly down her cheek. And she's ruining everything. The detective said nothing. Neither did the other officer who entered to cuff me again and escort me down the hall. I screamed until my voice cracked. She's lying, my father is alive. I have the proof, just check the files, check my... But my voice echoed in a place no one was listening. They took my shoelaces, my earrings, my belt. A woman with cold hands patted me down and handed me a beige jumpsuit. And suddenly I was behind a locked door. Fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. The sound of a woman sobbing in the next cell. And the slow, suffocating realization I had no one. And the truth was buried under her crocodile tears. The courtroom was too cold. Not physically, just spiritually. There was no justice here, only performance. Strategy, optics. I sat in the defendant's chair, wrists pressed tight against my thighs to stop the shaking. My attorney leaned over to whisper something about damage control. I didn't hear him. My eyes were locked on the woman across the aisle. My mother, Diane Simmons. She wore navy this time, serious, tasteful, courtroom approved. A pearl brooch on her blazer. A solemn frown carved into her expression like stone. Like she was the victim, like I'd somehow betrayed her. Michael sat behind her, silent, his arms folded. His smirk had faded since the pre-trial. Maybe the cameras made him nervous. Or maybe he thought I was stupid enough to go down quietly. I scanned the room again. No sign of my father. My heart dropped lower into my chest. The judge shuffled some papers and cleared her throat. Claire Whitmore, you stand before this court charged with burglary, breaking and entering, and possession of confidential material obtained without consent. The words blurred. I could barely breathe. I glanced at the gallery again, one last desperate time. Still no, the doors burst open. Everyone turned. 3 agents in navy windbreakers strode down the center aisle, swift and purposeful. The lead one held a folder, familiar, thick, and stamped. The same files I'd hidden. The same evidence I hadn't destroyed. Your Honor, the agent said firmly, flashing a badge. We have an active federal warrant. Gasps rippled through the room. The judge blinked. Excuse me. He didn't wait for permission. Diane Simmons, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, falsification of legal documents, obstruction of justice, and attempted unlawful transfer of estate holdings. My mother stood up so fast her chair screeched. What? Michael shot to his feet. The second agent approached her calmly and began reading her rights. This is outrageous, she snapped. She's the one on trial. Then the third agent walked in. Holding the flash drive, I watched her pale. Ms. Simmons, the first agent continued, we have recordings of your conversations with Michael Hands regarding staging a death, forging financial documents, and declaring a false cremation without medical confirmation. The room buzzed in disbelief. The gallery leaned forward. One of the jurors covered their mouth. My mother's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked like someone had stolen the script from her hands mid-performance. The agent stepped aside. And then I saw him, my father. He stepped through the open doors like a storm delayed, hair longer, eyes older but still him, alive, real, here. I stood so fast my chair nearly fell. He met my eyes, and for a moment I didn't care that everyone was watching. Didn't care that I was wearing courtroom gray or that I hadn't slept in 2 nights. He opened his arms. "I'm sorry I was late," he said, voice breaking. I ran to him. Sobs tore through my chest as I wrapped my arms around him, barely believing he was solid, breathing, warm. "You came back," I cried. "I never left you," he whispered. Behind us, Diane's voice cracked. "You set me up, both of you." But no one was listening to her anymore. The judge tried to regain order. The bailiff restrained Michael. The agents finished cuffing my mother. But I barely saw any of it. Because in that moment, I had something bigger than revenge. I had truth. And truth was louder than any lie she'd ever told. 1 month later, the porch creaked beneath our chairs the same way it used to when I was a teenager sneaking out at midnight. Only now, my father was beside me, awake, alive, sipping black coffee from the old chipped mug that still bore the faded logo of his law school. I sat next to him, knees tucked up to my chest, my own mug nestled between my hands, warming my fingers in the crisp morning air. The sunrise over the North Carolina hills was slow, quiet, gold melting into pink across the horizon. Peace didn't arrive like thunder. It settled in quietly, like fog rolling over tired land. He glanced at me. "You saved everything," he said. "Even when I didn't believe you'd forgive me." I didn't answer right away. I watched the birds pecking along the fence line, the neighbor's dog trotting down the driveway like it had a mission. Then I said, "I almost didn't." He nodded. "I know." There was no need to explain. He knew what I meant, for leaving me out, for disappearing, for making me the middle of a war I never started, for trusting me too late. But now he was here, not hiding in a cabin, not whispering through burner phones. "Here, you should have told me sooner," I said softly. "I was trying to protect." I glanced sideways. "Funny how many people say that when they're about to break your heart." He chuckled under his breath, then went quiet. "You sound like your mother when you're angry." "Please don't say that," I muttered. He grinned and sipped his coffee. We sat like that for a long time, letting the silence speak where words couldn't reach. Inside the house, the kitchen still smelled like cinnamon toast. The headlines still ran replays of the courtroom arrest. My mother's face frozen in shock. Michael's voice caught on wiretap. There was still noise in the world, but out here on this porch, things had gone still enough to hear my own breath again. "I'm thinking about leaving the city," I said. "Starting fresh." He nodded. "You could stay a while here, I mean, I wouldn't mind." "I might," I said with a faint smile. "But first I want to do something with all of it." He looked over. "All of what?" "The story, the evidence, what happened to us, what happened to me." He blinked. "You want to go public?" "I want to help people," I said. "People like me who didn't see it coming, who trusted the wrong face, who lost everything before they knew they were in a fight." He was quiet for a beat, then he said, "She's going to hate that." I smirked. "That's not even the best part." We clinked our mugs together, no toast necessary. Peace didn't fix everything, but it gave us a place to start. And that was more than I ever thought I'd have again. 2 years later, I stood on a stage in downtown Charlotte, a wireless mic clipped to my collar and a spotlight warming my shoulders. Behind me, the screen read, "CLAREWHITMORE, founder, Hearthstone Integrity Group helping survivors reclaim the truth." The panel host turned to me. "Claire, if you could leave the audience with one takeaway, what would it be?" I glanced out at the crowd. Faces lit with interest, pens poised, phones quietly recording. Somewhere in the front row, my dad sat proudly, a worn leather notebook on his lap. His memoir was halfway done. I took a breath and said, "Sometimes the people closest to you are your greatest tests, but also your greatest revelations." A ripple of quiet followed, a few nods, a few murmurs. I continued, steady and sure, "Justice isn't about revenge, it's about reclaiming your voice, your agency, your peace." Applause followed, not wild, not performative, just sincere. Afterward, 3 different women came up to thank me. One handed me a folded letter. Another asked about our pro bono services. The third just hugged me. Outside, the sky was soft with spring light, and for the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel like I was running from anything. I was building something, from the ashes, from the lies, from the truth no one else wanted to face. And I was never going back. That was the end of my story. I still think about the moment my father chose to fake his own death instead of going straight to the police. Was that desperation? Or was it the only way he could survive long enough to expose the truth? And I have to ask you, did he do the right thing? Or would you have handled it differently in his place? Tell me what you think in the comments. And if this journey meant something to you, please like this video and subscribe so we can keep having these conversations together.